She wasn't aware of that one. And then I said, oh, my favorite is the Alvin brothers. Oh my gosh, my parents. That's theirs too. As a matter of fact, I go, no. Because yeah, I'm named after them. They got my name from that song. And I said, well, that was my favorite song. I felt very old. Things out loud. I said, Melissa, I'm almost old enough to be your father. Do the math. Hence the Allman Brothers as an inspiration for her name.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hello, everybody.
Good afternoon.
morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Only 9 you count. Chair, we have about 12 we have about 12 members present right now, so if you wanted to wait a minute or two to see who else jumps on, then we can start.
Absolutely.
I'll take the call.
You got it. Thank you.
Okay, I'll give a test.
Yes, Mayor Ortega, we can hear you.
Good, thank you.
Chair, we could go ahead and start if you'd like.
Okay. Thank you. Well, welcome everybody to the March 18th, 2021 meeting. Welcome everybody. And Pat, you want to do a roll call?
Yes. Vice Mayor Veronica Malone, City of Avondale.
Present.
Councilmember Clay Goodman from the City of Buckeye.
Present.
Mayor Kevin Hartkey, City of Chandler. Oh, we have you, Mayor. Mayor Alexis Haramasillo. Mayor Jenny Dickey, Town of Fountain Hills.
Here.
Mayor Bridget Peterson, Town of Gilbert.
Here.
Councilmember Lauren Tomachoff, City of Glendale.
Here.
Vice Mayor Bill Stipp, City of Goodyear.
Present.
Supervisor Jack Sellers, Maricopa County.
Here.
Councilmember Francisco Heredia, City of Mesa.
Here.
Vice Mayor John Edwards, City of Peoria.
Here.
Mayor Kate Gallego, City of Phoenix.
Here.
There's no representative for Queen Creek today. Mayor David Ortega, City of Scottsdale.
Present.
Councilmember Roland Winter, City of Surprise. Councilmember Robin Arredondo Savage, City of Tempe.
Here. Ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Councilmember Linda Loborian. Mayor Rui Pereira, Town of Wickenburg.
Here.
And Mayor Michael Lavalde, Town of Youngtown.
Yes, Pat, I'm here.
Thank you. We're all set, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Pat. Okay, well, first on the agenda today is the public comment. For today's public meeting, comments are being taken in a written format and will be entered into the official minutes of the meeting. Item number 2 is the minutes. The minutes for the January 21st, 2021 board meeting are presented for approval. I need a motion and a second to approve the minutes. Do I have a motion?
Move, Kevin Herkey.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second. Clay Goodman.
Thank you, sir. All those in favor say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? All right. Item number 3 is the consent agenda. The consent agenda is presented for action.
Mr. Chair?
Yes,
Mr.
ma'am.
Chair, we skipped over the CEO report.
Oh, I am
Item
terribly
number
sorry.
2.
I'm sorry. Sorry, Scott. So we have the CEO report. I am so sorry, Scott. So,
Oh, that's okay.
Mr. Smith, can
I won't take it personal, but I will. No.
I
No,
would.
thank you. And
I
you're
would.
going
I'm
to.
sorry.
No, that's okay. You may regret not skipping over me because I'm going to ask you to indulge me just a few minutes. We've had a lot happen since we were last together, so I appreciate seeing everybody after taking a month off. As I've said, I'll get right to it. Got a lot to cover. First of all, I'd like to let you know that today is Transit Employee Appreciation Day, and this is especially important for us. And I've told you this before, and I just can't.
I'm going to send Pat a message that you're here.
Okay, if you could all turn off or mute your microphones, thank you. It's been a year now that our workers have been providing absolutely important and essential service. And from day one, we had a large contingent of our workers who showed up, ran the buses, the trains, the paratransit, sometimes not knowing what the risk was. We've worked well with them over the last year, and unfortunately, we've been able to avoid the big impact, but they were always there. And so I hope they understand how appreciative we are of their efforts. And please, if you see a transit worker, especially one of our frontline workers, let them know how much we appreciate what they've done for our community and your residents over the past year, and we'll continue to do. As part of our appreciation, we were able over the last week to work with Maricopa County Health Department and Phoenix Union High School District in doing a dedicated COVID vaccination site for transit workers in the Valley, both Valley Metro, City of Phoenix, and also U.S. Postal Service workers. This was held last Friday, Saturday, and Sunday at Cesar Chavez High School. We had over 3,100 individuals who received vaccinations, COVID vaccinations. Next, please. COVID vaccinations. And we had several Valley Metro team members who volunteered on the site. And we're just so grateful that we were able to help them out and get them in their own group for vaccinations, so they didn't have to fight all the lines and everything at State Farm and could get on and schedule that. Lastly, some of you, or many of you may have heard on the news, we did have a light rail derailment over the weekend. It's because of the single tracking due to construction in downtown. This was a 3-car train, and as you can see, all 3 left the tracks. We are so very fortunate that while we did suffer some property damage to the trains, that as you can see, there was a vacant lot, and we escaped with no serious injuries to any passengers or employees, and we're count ourselves very, very lucky and grateful that we're able to do that. I'd like to have a special recognition to both what we call our maintenance of equipment staff, those who take care of the trains, and in this case, the maintenance of way, those who take care of the tracks and the electrical. You can see that this was quite a mess, that those, at least 2 of the trains are a long way off the tracks. If you go by there now, which is 11th Street between Washington and Jefferson, you will not see any trains there. It is all cleared, and as a matter of fact, the maintenance of way worked overtime and 24/7 to move the trains, to repair some power poles and lines that were down on this, and to get us back to normal service. So really a great example of our team working together and the professionalism of our team. And once again, we're so very grateful that there were no injuries. On a positive note, this last Friday, our first streetcar arrived, as you can see on the back of a flatbed from Brookville, Pennsylvania. Made the long trek across the country, came into our yard. We'll be having an event this next week, but this is pretty exciting to finally have a streetcar arrive on site. And now we'll go through the on-site preparations, and we're expecting a few more of these to come in over the next few weeks and months. So we looking forward to starting service in Tempe next fall. And I'll give a little side note. I was actually driving south toward Tucson and was quite surprised when I was in Casa Grande, and I just happened to glance over on the westbound traffic I-10, and there's our streetcar. Of course, you couldn't miss it with that gigantic safety vest that it was wearing in front. That color jumps out at you. And my wife even saw it. She goes, "Oh my gosh, you can't miss that." So we're excited about that, and excited for both the region and for the city of Tempe. Also want to let you know of something that we've been looking at and are going to pursue. Electric buses are really popular, both in the political realm and also as a service model. Now, they've been around for a few years, but it's just been recent that there have been technological advancements that would get us really interested in these. As a matter of fact, 4 years ago, we brought some electric buses into town, tested them. We test them in July and August when they're stressed the most. And the battery technology simply did not support it. We were getting, the manufacturer were promising 200 miles on a charge. We were getting maybe 70. So we lost interest because it just didn't perform in the summer, in the heat of the summer. Well, technology has improved significantly, and so we invited 3 bus makers last summer to come back in town and let's look at it. And believe it or not, all 3 of them performed much better. As a matter of fact, they performed well enough that we decided that this would be something we'd like to test further. And so working with the cities of Phoenix and Tempe specifically, we are preparing to apply for what's called a LONO, or low emissions grant program from the FTA, with the idea that maybe we'll bring some buses and do some infrastructure and test these out in a controlled environment on some of our routes in a longer term to see if these really can be a part of our future. The jury's still out because it is quite a strain to run these buses in the heat of the summer, and we don't know where we'll do it, but we're going to be applying for that in the next few weeks, literally, and we'll give you an update as to see how that works. So we're excited about that. Next thing is just a more administrative. Title VI, for those of you who may not be aware, is Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. It is the part that governs our outreach and our equity portion to make sure that when we take actions as it relates to routes and fares and service and things like that, that all parts of the community are included. And so we have to follow a very, very strict protocol to make sure that that happens. That program has to be updated periodically, and we are now in the middle of this. We'll be working with your staff, and are working already with your staff, and of course with the city of Phoenix as the designated recipient on our updates. And you can see the timeline here. We look to have public comments in the next month or two. This is something that needs to come before you for approval. The update does, and the Phoenix City Council as the designated recipient. We'll look for that near the end of the summer, maybe early fall, to have that. We also are very proud of our Commute Solutions group and those who work within our office to provide opportunities for, since we are a transit agency, for commuting using public transportation. And we're happy to announce that this year we were named one of the best workplaces for commuters. And that's not by accident. You think it would be a given, but no, we have a great staff that works really diligently and works with the community and your staff and your cities to come up with plans that help make it easy for our workers to commute, to take the cars off the street and be to our sites using public transportation. The last thing I'd like to talk to you about is I'd like to give you an update on the American Rescue Plan. For those of you who maybe have not been following the news, and I know all of you have, The American Rescue Plan, or ARP, is the $1.9 trillion bill that was recently passed by Congress and signed by the president just a week or so ago. This is the third round of COVID relief, for lack of a better term, that has come out of Congress. And as with the first two, there is a significant amount of money specifically dedicated to public transportation. This is the single largest infusion of federal funds ever. As a matter of fact, not only is it the most for public transportation, but Congress has funded public transportation through COVID relief more than any other transportation mode. As a matter of fact, I think I read somewhere that if you take all the others, such as airlines, that combined, they don't match the amounts that have been sent to public transportation. This is a great blessing for us. The most recent ARP is $30.5 billion for public transportation, of which a little over $200 million is estimated to come to the MAG region. That's our estimates and others in Washington. The funds will be allocated by FTA, as you can see, using existing program formulas like they were with the original amount, but there is a cap on the amount, and that is we're only eligible for 132% of our 2018 expenses that we reported to the FTA, and there's also an amount for about 1.7 billion to help us with our rail projects that we'll be talking with the rail cities about. Now, the interesting thing is that these funds are allocated to the two urban zones that we have here in Metro Phoenix, the Phoenix Mesa and the Avondale Goodyear. The $208 million will go to the Phoenix Mesa because Avondale Goodyear in the first CARES Act received an amount that matches the 132% of 2018. So there will not be any separate funds. So that $208 million will come to the region and then is split out by operators. So it will go to, and I'll have a table just in a little while, Valley Metro, City of Phoenix, City of Glendale, Peoria, and Scottsdale receive funds because we are operators. These then flow through to your cities through our IGAs, and I'll get to that in just a second. What this means is with the three different CARES COVID recovery, there has been almost $500 million brought into our region in transit-specific funds. You can see about 198 million from the original CARES, 86 from what we call CRISA or CARES 2, and then the 208 we talked about. $490 million. Now, this is primarily meant, and the original objective is to cover operating expenses and to ensure that levels of service and employment are maintained. And we have $490 million. That is huge. As we can see, it's especially beneficial for us because in our region, sales taxes, which we anticipated would dive precipitously, have either held steady or in many cases in cities and with the region, the Prop 400 have actually gone up year over year, which means that our real COVID impact is twofold. Number one, additional expenses in cleaning and other things we've had to do related to adjusting and confronting the pandemic. And also, we obviously, because of the lower ridership and the rear door boarding and other things and reduction in actual aggressive fare enforcement on light rail, we have seen a shortfall and will continue to see a significant shortfall in our fare revenue. As you can see that in 2019, the last full year, we collect around 51 million or just over 51 million in fares between bus and light rail. This says, and Paul can get into the details, will get in his budget presentation, but that is down significantly. That's the real nut we have to fill from a revenue standpoint in the region is this loss. And you can see with that 490 million, if we were only going to care about covering fare revenue, even if we receive zero in fare revenue, we could still cover 9 to 10 years. I guess the point I'm making is that we should feel, and we do feel very grateful that with that Congress has specifically funded a transit to make sure that we maintain levels of operation and maintain employment levels, both with us and our contractors as best we can, because it is really expense related. Next slide, please. This just shows you some of the allocations. And once again, this is done through MAG.
through their process and how they allocate funds. And you can see those things that go to Valley Metro through ARP. There's about 50 million to Valley Metro Rail and about the same amount to RPTA, which is split among a little bit more. The other amounts, 158 million to the bus, which is split among as the cities that I mentioned before. As it relates to how it goes through to your cities, just to remind you, we get this allocation and then we work with your staff through first of all, we cover our fare loss, we cover the expenses that are incurred because of COVID, extra cleaning, things like that. And then we give you a credit through the IGA for the amounts that you normally would pay to Valley Metro. And that's how the cities benefit from this, is through the amounts they don't have to pay as much. That's how we've done it in the first two acts. And so therefore, that's sort of the proposal, although I'd like to talk to you about maybe a little change from that this time. As you can see, this is the next slide, please. This was the amount that went to the Avondale Goodyear zone. That was in the CARES Act. Because that amount exceeded the 2018 132%, that zone has received nothing. It doesn't mean those cities don't get anything, but we don't get that extra funding through that suburban zone. Now, the couple of things I'd like to talk to you about, and I'm throwing these out both as items of discussion and proposals, and they may seem a little bold, is that with all this money that's come in, we appreciate the fact that the way we fund is somewhat, no, it's not somewhat, it's unique. There's no other regional transit authority in the country that is funded or set up like Valley Metro, where most of the funding and the decisions really are bottom up. As we've told you before, and Paul will get in a little bit more in the budget, we operate operationally primarily with regional funds, Prop 400, and local funds. And that's why when we get the federal money, it comes up primarily back to the cities on theirs. I understand why cities would do this, and I appreciate staff. It's been our history. I'd like to maybe put on the table for your consideration that perhaps on this round, since we have sales tax that have held steady, that we perhaps take a more conservative or prudent approach and perhaps hold back a portion of this to be determined in the regional fund. For this reason, I don't know what next year, the year after that, or year after that will hold. I know that with this 500 million, we have plenty of funds to get us through normal operating for the next couple of 3 years. However, we don't know what emergencies may come up, and we don't know what opportunities we may have. And it would be nice if we could build up our fund, our regional fund, so we could adjust to those without having to come back to you and say, hey, you know that money I gave you last year? I'd really like some of it back. We know that isn't a nice thing to do because it's hassle. And we can always at any time, if it's in the regional fund, allocate it out to the cities. So I'd like to put that on the table, that perhaps on this round of funding that we consider holding back and building up our regional transportation fund rather than rush into giving all of that back to you as cities. And I know that your staff's not going to like what I just said, but I'm really, really concerned and would like to take a more prudent approach to this, and we can always adjust. It gives us the flexibility to be able to plan in the future and adjust anytime. It means it doesn't mean your city won't get the money. If we don't use it, it can always go back in future years. The second thing I'd like to put out to you is that while as a region we have encountered or experienced pretty positive financial results, the reality is that those aren't all equal. There are some cities who frankly are receiving record sales tax revenue. There are other cities that have been flat or even a slight reduction. This experience is not uniform. The other thing is we have some service-related issues related to our ability to put service out in, right now we're dealing with an issue in the West Valley. So the experience with COVID is not uniform across the area. One of the not the challenge, but the issues we have is that as we apportion funds out, the concept of jurisdictional equity always comes into play. Now, the basis of this, and I'm stating this, although there is no hard, fast rule, but it's sort of like trying to give back to communities sort of what they pay in or their residents put in into Prop 400. I know that's not a perfect example. That's generally how it works. What that means, though, is that if we have pockets where we need to, for example, have a city or a group of cities that are experiencing different challenges under COVID than another city does, as we distribute funds out, this jurisdictional equity formula always comes into play. This has created some obstacles for us to truly handle regional issues because it actually could cause us to say, well, we can't put that money there because it might get the JE formula a little bit out of whack. Now, if every city operated in a transit island, that would work. But we all know that we have very few routes outside of the couple three in Phoenix and maybe in some of the cities, and of course, city of Phoenix, city of Tempe, a couple three routes, where our routes and our services cross city lines. So if one city experiences a problem, to deal with that problem, you are going to involve other cities, the exact opposite of a regional system. And what I would propose is that we look seriously at least with this COVID money, that we take a regional approach. And if there are pockets where we need to have some specific assistance to a city or group of cities to solve some issue, that we perhaps overlook some of the jurisdictional equity and take more of a regional approach, since these funds are literally coming into the region. Those are the two things I'd like to put on the table as it relates to this COVID funding. We're not going to solve those problems now. I'd like to put them out and for your consideration. And perhaps if you're interested in pursuing those, you can talk to your staff. We can talk to your financial staff and address those and come up with a plan to come back to you and present. We're in no hurry to do any of this stuff, as I've said. The first two rounds of funding have no expiration date. The ARP funding, I think, expires in 2024. So we do have time to work these, and you don't get this cash up front. This is on a reimbursement basis. So we haven't even totally used the funds that have been allocated to us before. So we do have time to consider it, but it does come into budget considerations since you are all and we are looking at budgets right now. So those are things I'd like to at least to maybe consider and see if from a policy standpoint you'd like to address those or at least revisit those. If not, fine, but I felt a need to put them on the table. Now going back to the calendar, next slide. Our next meeting is April 18th, and you can see the TMC RMC and the Audit and Finance Committee meeting in April. And Mr. Chair, unless there are any specific questions, that is my report, and I thank you for the time.
Mr. Chair, I think you are muted.
I'm sorry about that. Thank you, Scott. Is there any questions out there? Because I'm sure there's some questions. I have quite a few questions as well.
I've got a question, Mayor Kevin Hertke.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Scott, listening to your two requests, I guess, again, the devil's in the details with these, of course. And what does that mean? And again, making sure that
you guys, somebody's muted. Somebody needs to unmute or to mute.
Yeah, thank you. And I assume that any expenditures of these dollars would come back to us with your first request on that. And certainly the treatment that this is most certainly one-time dollars rather than ongoing. So this would certainly not be used for any advancement of staff or anything that we would need an ongoing stream from. So I'm interested in knowing more about what this would mean. And concerning the second, I am a jurisdictional equity kind of guy, meaning at least regional, in the sense that, as we look at these, is there a sense that you mentioned no city is an island, but we're certainly impacted by what goes around us. And I 100% agree with you. But again, it's a little more just needing to know more details before I could give a yes to either one of those, but certainly not opposed to the conversation.
Thank you, Mayor. And just to cover briefly, I agree with you. The proposal would not change or impact our base policies or what we deal with Prop 400 or any other type of thing. It would simply be, as you said, this one time and only relate to the federal, the COVID relief funds that come in. And as a matter of fact, if those aren't used, then it would go back to the cities based, once again, on the jurisdictional equity type formula. It's just if we need, from a regional standpoint, to perhaps plug some gaps or take advantage of some opportunities that are more regional in nature, that have that. And so we would work on the details. It is, once again, not to expand anything. The primary purpose of these relief funds is to maintain existing levels of service and of staffing. We would not use these to embark on any kind of additional, without, of course, direction from the board. But it would just mean to cover the uncertainties and make sure that we don't have to come back to you to cover these things in case there is some sort of unforeseen thing. We have that luxury because of the overall financial situation. I don't want to be flippant about it, but I also want to make sure that we keep in reserve enough that we don't have to come back to you in years 2 or 3 and say, gee, wish we would have kept this COVID. Now can you give us some of the money back? I know that that's how we've thought in the past. I'm just maybe throwing out there, since this is unique and one-time money, that maybe we do it this one time. So I agree with you. The devil is in the details, and we'll work with you and your staff to come up with how that specifically could work.
Mr. Chair, it's Lauren. I do have I don't even really think I know now enough about what you're proposing to even really comment on it. Who would be making the decisions? Would this be administrative? I think this is something, I'm surprised that you didn't notice this as a study session and present it to us in that way. Because this is a really big ask for the board, especially when we don't really even understand the concept of exactly what you're talking about. So, I don't feel like I'm in a position to even say anything other than bring it to a study session and let's talk about it there.
And council member, I appreciate that. I was not expecting any decision or anything. I was purely put it on the table as a concept, understanding that this would take a lot more discussion and a lot more work, both at the board level and at the staff level. But since it is relevant right now, this issue's come up. ARP was just passed. It has also come up in the financial working group about how are we going to allocate these funds. I thought it prudent to merely put it on the table. I was not expecting any kind of decision or your understanding, because it is so new and it is broad-based. It was simply to get it on the radar and see, is this worth at least continuing on a conversation? You may decide as we get in the details that it's not something worth pursuing. That's fine.
Right.
But I just thought it was good to at least put it out on the table so you're aware of it. And if there is an interest in reserving, putting some of these funds in a reserve that could be held for future needs, that's a concept that was worth perhaps at least pursuing.
Mr. Chair, if I could follow up. What I'm saying is, if you have a concept in mind, put together a plan and bring it to a study session and present it to the board. That's what I. And
we'll be more than happy to do that. And we will pursue that. If that's something the board is, I don't want to waste your time and our time if it's something you're dead set against. But if it is worth pursuing, we will work and put together a plan and come back to the staff and to you.
That's my point, Scott, is that how do we know whether we're dead set against when we don't really know exactly what you're talking about? So, I mean, I'm sorry if you have to spend your time putting together a plan, but how do you want us to have any buy-in when we don't know exactly what you're talking about? I can't say, I don't want to feel like, oh, now they brought us a plan and so now they've spent time on it. I mean, this is going to require a little bit of, work on your part if you want to present this to us, somebody to show us what you're talking about. I'm going to yield it. I'm sure there's a lot of other conversations, but I don't know how you can say whether you're dead set against it or absolutely for it when we don't really have any details.
Lauren, I appreciate that, Councilmember. This is a philosophical and conceptual. Historically, what we have done is that when we have excess funds at the Valley Metro level, for example, if we get to the end of the year, at least, for example, on rail and in other instances, we refund the money back to the cities. That's generally how we've done that. And so the money goes back to you when you've paid for us and there's money. That's a general concept and philosophy. All I'm asking is that if we revisit that philosophy, subject to details, and say, would you be open to the concept that with these funds that perhaps we hold some in reserve and we keep them in the fund as opposed to sending everything back to cities immediately? That's the general concept and philosophy that I'd just like to put on the table. If there's a philosophical difference, you don't need to know the details with that approach, then fine. I just wanted to lay that out there as a philosophical and conceptual, as a change to how we have historically done things. Is it worth pursuing? Is that something, holding back some of these federal funds, these one-time federal funds in reserve to ensure that we are covered for the next 2 or 3 years with the idea it can always go back to the cities? Is that a concept that the board is interested in pursuing? Because that is a change with how things have done. Normally, if you pay us $100 and we get at the end of the year and there's $10 left over, we cut you a check for $10. So our idea would be, and without getting details, if now that we have $100, which includes federal money, would we, instead of cutting you a check back for every penny, would we hold some of that in the fund to make sure we're covered for unforeseen deals in the future? That's all I'm asking for is your ideas and your reaction to that concept without any specific approval or anything like that.
Okay, John, if I could, just one more thing. I mean, Glendale, and I'm sure everybody, in this Zoom meeting or whatever we're using today, wants to be a good regional partner. But, as Mayor Harkey said, the devil is in the details. What would constitute a reason for, allocating money outside of the jurisdictional equity? How would the decision be made? What kind of supporting all of that stuff, we don't know any of those details. So
you're right.
I'm committed to being a good regional partner. I am. And I know everybody here is that, without knowing more about how this would work, I still am not willing to say one way or the other.
And Councilmember, I'm not asking you for a decision on any of that. I'm sure there will come a time when if we do have details, it will be presented to you in detail, explained, and then is that the time to make the decision on whether to move forward or not.
Scott, could I add something real quick?
Yeah.
So we also had this conversation at our financial working group earlier this week, and so it was a good conversation. What we agreed to do was to put together some options on how this might work to present to your staff in the next few weeks. So we are working on a conceptual plan of how it would work and what the impacts would be. So we'll have that to your staff, and then we could certainly have a study session to discuss some of that with the board at a later date.
Thank you, Paul. And once again, I felt the need to let you know that this exists because we're talking about a lot of money. And we're talking about a lot of money that was intended for a specific purpose. And it does impact both our budget considerations and your city budget considerations. And I felt it was prudent, since that conversation was going on at staff level, to make you aware of this situation. Not asking for a decision, but just to make you aware of the situation. Now it's on your radar. As Paul works on that with the staff, I'm sure it'll percolate up. I hope it does. And if there is something worth pursuing, we will come back to you with those details in a more formal basis and present it in either study session or for action at the appropriate places, working through the normal process.
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, Mayor.
Thank you. I am aware of Mayor Ortega's excellent advice that we move on, but I did want to ask, was this presented to the management committee?
No, Mayor, thank you. Nothing has been presented. This was once again, a general idea that is only relevant because this was passed last week and it did come up in the financial working group. There's not a specific proposal, simply a concept once again. So, I mean, I'm not looking for any specific vote or whatever. So no, we have not worked through the normal process simply because it did come up and there was discussion. And so we felt it prudent just to lay it on the table for you today. Sometimes you do that just so we can start the discussion. And of course, if there is anything specific, it will work through financial working group, RTAG, and the city managers, the TMC, RMC, before any specific proposal comes back to this board. So if there is anything specific, any details, those will be fully vetted at the staff and the manager level before you come back. I just wanted to make you aware of it so that when we showed up with this reporter, you heard it going on, and because it does impact your budgets and our budget, it wasn't something of a surprise.
Wonderful. Well, before it comes to a work study, I think it would be great to work through it in detail with our staff.
Absolutely.
And Mayor, I can assure you that will happen.
Okay, so I know we probably have a few more questions, but in the interest of time, we probably need to move forward. So Scott, you need to work with our staff members
We will.
and yourself, get a presentation together, get it set up for a study session, because I don't think anybody on this phone is willing to commit to anything without addressing the items piece by piece. So if you could just get that together, get with Pat, put it on a future agenda study session so we can take a look at it.
And Vice Mayor, I appreciate that, and that was the plan all along. Once again, I was not acting, it was simply to throw it on the table, and it will work through, and believe me, no one will be left out. It will go to staff and be developed in just the way that we've talked about, and before it comes back to you.
Okay, thank you. Before we move on, I failed to mention, I wanted to welcome Mayor David Ortega, who is representing the city of Scottsdale. I just want to welcome you to the board and look forward to working with you. Okay, next item would be the consent agenda. These items are listed for approval. Is there any member of the committee that would like anything removed from the agenda?
Mr. Chair, the federal agenda.
Federal agenda, okay. Anything else? Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and ask for everything but the federal agenda to be approved. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda minus the federal agenda? I need a motion and a second.
This is Clay Goodman, so move.
Thank you, Clay.
Second, Kevin Hardy.
Thank you, sir. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. So, Mr. Smith, do you have someone to present items for the federal agenda?
I turned over to Alexis Tamron-Kinsey, and Mayor, if you have a specific question on it, would be more than happy to address that. But I'll turn it over to Alexis.
I will just go ahead and make a motion to approve the federal agenda, except that removing the Capital I-10 West Phoenix Phase 1 project from our agenda at this point.
Okay, so I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second, this is Bill Stick.
Okay. So going for, so if I don't hear any opposition, I'll just assume this is unanimous. So is there anybody against this? Opposes it? Okay. So the motion carries.
Excuse me, I think you should still have a yes or no vote and clarify it, not the negative vote.
Okay.
So please, I wish to vote in affirmation, not in opposition, but when you do call after that, then if no one says I'm opposed, then we know it would be unanimous, so.
Okay, so all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion carries.
And Mr. Chair, Mayor, we'll follow up with you and your staff on that specific item.
Wonderful, thank you.
Okay.
Okay. So item number 5 is the new fare collection system, customer service contract. And number 6 is the new fare collection retail network administration plus smart card fare. These two items are being presented together as they are related. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I will turn it over to Paul Hodgins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you mentioned, we do have a presentation that covers both items. And actually, our budget manager, Tyler Olson, is going to take the lead in providing the presentation. Thank you, Tyler.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the board. I'll walk you through the Retail Network and Customer Service Awards. Both of these awards that we're requesting today will support the Fare Collection System Replacement Project that we are currently working on with the City of Phoenix and Vix Technology. I'll give some context for that project in the coming slides, then go into the details of how these two awards will support that project. So over the last several years, we have worked in collaboration with City of Phoenix, incorporating input from our member cities through Fare Policy Working Group, as well as committees and boards, as well as workshops. Our top goals for the project were to offer better payment options for our riders with enhanced features such as fare capping and mobile ticketing, improving data collection for our most important metrics such as ridership and revenue, have a true point of sale control over reduced fare media, linking reduced fare IDs to passenger smart cards, something that we don't have today. This will have a great impact on reducing the amount of fare abuse that we see in our system today. And this new fare collection system will get us there. We also wanted to phase the project in such a way that it would result in the smoothest transition for our customers, moving away from our legacy system that we have today to the future system. Let me explain a little bit more about the procurements. So we approach this project regionally, even down to the procurement level. Next slide. City of Phoenix released a procurement for the majority of what we offer today in our system and made the award to Vix Technology last March, while Valley Metro released procurements for the retail network and customer service. The retail network is currently managed by City of Phoenix and is not new. However, the system will need enhanced customer service, which I'll tell you about in the coming slides. A little more about the City of Phoenix contract with Vix Technology. Next slide. This is a major enhancement to the region and our customers and will be with us for quite some time. The project includes a base contract of $33.2 million and an ongoing operations and maintenance support contract of $28 million. Capital installation will take place over a period of 3 years and is funded with 80% federal and 20% Prop 400. The ongoing operations and maintenance costs are shared by the City of Phoenix, Valley Metro, and regional partners, and includes 9 years initial operations plus 2 3-year extensions. So the new system will include mobile ticketing, reloadable smart cards for the general public. Our current system only offers this for corporate accounts to participate. Fare capping, which we're very excited about. Essentially, customers can tap their way to earn daily and monthly passes. It's a great value to the customers, particularly those that can't afford to pay a monthly pass up front and end up spending more in day passes throughout that same period. So in the future system, customers who purchase enough day passes to equal the value of a monthly pass will ride the rest of the month for free. So to put that in context, today's all-day pass is $4. A 31-day pass is $64. If someone was to purchase 16 all-day passes in a calendar month, they would ride the rest of the month for free. As far as hardware, each rail station will have at least 2 TVMs to purchase and load value onto smart cards, along with multiple validators for riders to tap their smart cards and mobile tickets. Each bus will also have a validator for this purpose as well. Customers will be able to purchase and load value onto smart cards at our retail locations, which I'll tell you about shortly. The system will also be built with open architecture in mind, allowing us to integrate future technologies and software as things change, as times change. That way we aren't tied to the contractor for proprietary reasons. So this project has 2 major phases. Phase 1 really focuses on installing the validators on board both buses and at rail stations and rolling out the mobile app. It ultimately prepares us for the infrastructure for Phase 2. Phase 2 will launch reloadable smart card and ticket vending machines. Passengers will also be able to add value to their cards online, over the phone through customer service, and at retail locations. Auto loading will also be available. Some more great news is that our unbanked customers will be able to load cash onto both their mobile and smart card accounts. A little bit more about the timeline and how the awards we are seeking today fit within the regional fare collection system. I want to point out that the orange boxes are related to the City of Phoenix procurement milestones, while the purple boxes are the 2 awards we are presenting today. At the far left, you can see that we started the City of Phoenix procurement back in January of 2018, writing and refining the specifications and releasing an RFP a year later. The evaluation process was quite lengthy, with many proposals to review. We had a lot of good competition, including demonstrations by vendors. The panel had a regional representation and made the decision to award to Vix Technology. The project did experience some delay in kicking off due to the pandemic. However, that did take place in August of last year officially. Although Phase 2 won't be in place until May of 2023, There is a lot of work that needs to be done to get reduced fare cards in the hands of our customers prior to that launch date. For the awards we are seeking today, those efforts will start in September of this year with the Vix Customer Service team processing reduced fare applications, checking eligibility, taking pictures, and ultimately setting up those riders' accounts in the fare collection system database so that they're ready to go with phase 2 launch and ready to ride the system. At the same time, we will utilize InComp to provide the smart card media for the reduced fare IDs, which also serves as fare instruments for those passengers. Once we go live in May of 2023, I apologize, I forgot. Vix will also be taking customer service calls related to the mobile app when it launches as part of phase 2 in September of 22. So once we do go live in May of 23 with the regional fare collection system, Vix will provide ongoing customer service support for that fare collection system, while InCom will launch the retail network program and continue to be a supplier for fare media in the region. For the Retail Network Award, InCom will manage all aspects of the retail network, from distributing and replenishing smart cards to managing the retailers and revenue. InCom will only sell full fare cards to retailers. However, customers who have already applied for and received their reduced fare ID through the eligibility process can load value onto their cards. We will also utilize InCom services as a fare media supplier to the region. Some of the benefits, really a lower cost in the long term. Smart cards cost around $2 a piece and last up to 10 years. The equivalent cost of providing existing monthly pass media for the same period is over $7, so significantly cheaper for this type of media. This program makes it more simple for the customer as well. It's simply, can grab the Valley Metro gift card off the gift card display at the retail outlet and add value, or they can already take their purchase smart card in and load more value onto it. I would like to note that although we have not a not to exceed amount that we're proposing today, we will only be billed for actual purchases and loads on this contract. Valley Metro and City of Phoenix are also, Valley Metro and City of Phoenix are also exploring options to recover a portion of the expenses by charging a nominal fee to customers. This can create incentive for the customer to retain the card instead of carelessly disposing of it at bus stops and stations. We could also provide a credit for that fee on their account once they register their card online, which will give them, more website benefits and security and incentive to ride. Moving on to qualifications. So InCom is not new to the retail network industry. Having over 25 years of experience, a global presence, and also specific experience in tolling, and of course with many major transit agencies, as you can see on the right side of the screen. Let me tell you a little bit more about the differences in today's network versus the future network. So the current network sells magnetic stripe pass media at a 4% discount to retailers. All types of passes are sold, and it's currently managed by the City of Phoenix. So InCom is really going to change that with the smart card media sales, no more magnetic stripe, really loading value. That's what they do. They're going to be there to load value. Don't have to get into the reduced fare question. It's customer brings their card in there and they load it, unlike today. So they will also manage the supply and distribution of the media as well as relationships with retailers. For the customer service award, Vix Technology will provide a comprehensive service, customer service team. Now, we already perform the regional customer service function today. However, this supplemental team will specifically support the new fare collection, as I mentioned, and the multi-channel purchasing options for our customers. It's quite more extensive than what we have today. So the types of calls and support required for the new fare collection system will be significantly different, including payment processing, which has significant payment card industry or PCI risk that we've considered. Another very large effort that they will support is the reduced fare rollout, as I mentioned. In order to purchase the reduced fare media in the future system, customers will need to apply and be certified by a Valley Metro representative for their eligibility. Vix will have local staff to support the intake of customers and applications, as well as support the Valley Metro outreach events that we may want to get started on right away. That could include being part of a mobile unit that goes to a scheduled reduced fare sign-up event or fair at a community center, senior center, or similar locations in the Valley. Some more of the benefits with this contract is that outsourcing customer service support to a third party for this type of launch, system launch, is considered best practice. Vix was awarded the larger fare collection replacement project, so they know their software best and they've done this type of work before. The contract is also structured in such a way that we can tailor the service levels to our customer needs based on volume and peak periods. Also, the base term of the 5 years will get us through the reduced fare rollout and implementation. So onto the qualifications. Vix has quite extensive experience in fare collection as well as customer service and previous partnerships with Trackmar, its subcontractor for customer service in this case. So Trackmar is a well-recognized agency within the public sector. They also have experience in public transportation. And more importantly, Vix and Trackmar have performed these integrations together before for the same type of service at DART in Dallas, as well as the Capital Region Partners in Edmonton. So I'd like to reiterate some of the key differences in today's customer service effort and the additional Vix Trackmar service with the new fare collection system. So Valley Metro currently provides customer service to the regional Valley Metro system. Calls range from questions regarding route schedules and complaints or kudos to lost and found inquiries. The team also manages rider alerts function for transit changes and detours, proactively communicating and announcing any service disruptions. The Vix customer service team will provide specific support just for the Vix fare collection system, as well as manage the ongoing reduced fare applications that will come in before, as well as after ongoing, as long as we're operating after the launch of phase 2. They will also assist in customers with account inquiries, processing claims, refunds, taking payments, transferring accounts due to misplaced or stolen cards. Another key difference, as mentioned before, is the flexibility with this contract with Vix, that we can add and remove customer service agents as things ramp up or down. We just don't know the level of volumes or acceptance at this point. So moving on to pricing for the two contracts. There are two components for the contract for income, design and integration and media production. So the design and integration is a one-time cost to design the fare media with incorporating the Valley Metro branding and integrate into the Vix fare collection system. Now, the media production is 100% variable, so we're only getting charged for the smart card media that we order and need. And just to reiterate my earlier comment, the fare media administrative fee that we're considering to pass along to the customers to incentivize the retaining of those cards would be used to offset the production of these costs for the media production. So that fee amount, as well as other fare policy items related to the future system, will be discussed at a future board meeting. So this is a 5-year base with 2 options to extend 10 years total. As far as the customer service contract, there are 3 components for this contract value. The implementation, which covers the cost for support prior to the launch of the fare collection system, so prior to phase 2, including establishing a local call center so that we can have boots on the ground, really working hand in hand with customers to get those reduced fare IDs rolled out, as well as integration with the Vix fare collection system and labor to roll out that reduced fare ID. Base operations, this comes in after phase 2. So this covers the ongoing cost of customer service and reduced fare media application processing and fulfillment. The variable costs, this is a really great part of the contract, is that this really gives us the flexibility to pull in customer service agents as needed based upon call volumes, as I mentioned, with the system launch, of this magnitude, we want to ensure that this regional project goes off without a hitch, and that we have the resources in place when needed to do so. I will note that, this labor is remote support, so we're able to allow the vendor greater flexibility in putting that together, as well as save Valley Metro and the region costs by not having to overhire local staff just to let them go should call volumes not be at the expected level. So good flexibility there. I will say that both of these contracts are 10 years in total, which lines up with the City of Phoenix operations contract that gets us to year 2031. And the Vix contract in particular offers us additional flexibility to get through the launch, get over the big hump of call volumes in the first 5 years, and then we can reevaluate whether we would want to bring this work in-house or continue with the vendor. So with that, the recommendations that we are seeking today are on the screen. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions?
Mr. Chair, this is Bill. I've got a question.
Yes, sir.
Tyler, can you go back, I think, 2 slides, please? Oh, right there. I'm sorry, it was on one slide. So you mentioned on this slide that the base operations piece of the contract doesn't kick in until phase 2. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And phase 2 doesn't begin until 2023?
Right. That's correct.
We've got a 5-year contract and 4.5 million of it is going to be for the last 2 years of that contract?
No,
the last 3 years of the contract.
The customer service piece supporting the back end or supporting fare technologies may not kick into phase 2, but they will begin with the reduced fare ID launch and helping support that rollout. So that will begin this September.
Okay, so there's not an aspect of this contract that's not starting immediately. Is that correct?
There are some aspects that wouldn't start immediately. So some of the supporting some of the web-based value loading tools that Vix is implementing, that support wouldn't happen until those actually go live later. But the contract will kick in sooner to help with the reduced fare ID. And again, we only pay for the support that we need at the time. So there's not like a fixed fee every year.
So this is a not to exceed amount, we're not
Correct.
Contractually obligated to 9.457 million?
Correct.
Okay. Just for the rest of the board's benefit, we had a fairly in-depth conversation about this at the Audit and Finance Subcommittee. And it's my understanding that an additional robust conversation occurred at the Management Committee meeting regarding the, rolling this out at this time for something that isn't going to start for a number of years. But obviously, we leave it to the discretion of the board. But I think it's fair that the board understand the conversations that have taken place prior to this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Anybody else? Sorry, Pat, was there somebody else? No? Okay. So items, we're going to break them up into item number 5 is the new fare collection customer service contract. This is a 10-year contract, 5-year base contract with 2 extension options. Customer service network contract with Vix Technologies in the amount not to exceed $24,166,000. Contract value of $21,969,000 with a 10% contingency of $2,197,000. Do I have a motion? Did I lose everybody?
So moved, Kate Gallego.
Second, Kevin Hartke.
Thank you, Mayors. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Item number 5 carries. A is approved. Item number 6 is the new fare collection retail network administration plus smart card. This is a 10-year contract, 5-year basic contract with a 2-year extension. Retail network service contract with Incom in the amount not to exceed $10,217,000. Contract value of $9,288,000 with a 10% contingency of $929,000. Do I have a motion?
Bridget Peterson, move to approve.
Thank you, Bridget. Do I have a second?
Second, Lauren Tomachov.
Thank you, Laura. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Scott, for your staff. Reports. Item number 7 is the quarterly report. This is for presentation only. Is there any members that have any questions? No questions. Okay. Item number 8, the travel expenditure solicitations. This item is for presentation only. Are there any questions? Okay, seeing none. Item number 9, future agenda request. Are there any members of the board that have any items for future consideration? Seeing none. All right. Item number 10 would be the next meeting. The next meeting for the board is scheduled on Wednesday, April 22nd, 2021 at 10:15. Pat, is that right? Shouldn't that be Thursday? Shouldn't that be a Thursday?
It's Thursday, April 22nd.
That's what I thought.
At
Thank you.
11:15, yes. Sorry for the typo.
Thank you. And with that, we are adjourned.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We can go ahead and start the RPTA meeting now.
Yeah, don't run away, everybody. We still got our PTA.
Got
More
one
fun.
more. One more. All right. So public comment for today's public meeting is being taken in a written format and will be entered into the official minutes of the meeting. Item number 2 is the minutes for the January 21st, 2021 board meeting are presented for approval. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved, Mayor Pro.
Thank you, Mayor. And a second?
Second.
And who was that? I'm sorry. Thank you.
It's Councilmember Winters seconded the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Winters. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Okay. Item number 3 is the consent agenda. The consent agenda is presented for action. Is there any member of the committee that has any questions of an item that need to be pulled for separate discussion? Okay. So can I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda?
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Winters.
Second.
I heard Lauren. Thank you. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? All right, thank you. Item number 4 is the Valley Metro RPTA Fiscal 2022 Preliminary Operating and Capital Budget. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And sensing that you hadn't had nearly enough fun today, we put this on the agenda so Paul Hodgins could have a conversation with you about the budget. So I'll turn it over to Paul.
Thank you, Scott. Mr. Chair, members of the board, I have a high-level overview of our preliminary budget. Just to, if you go to the next slide, just to remind you where we've gone so far. We typically start this budget process pretty early. We start with key assumptions back in September. And I'll talk a little bit about this, but one of the key assumptions, or really one of the uncertainties, was what was going to happen to revenues. Back in August, September, we were still somewhat at the beginning of the pandemic. And so we put together several options that we were working on that I'll talk to a little bit. In October, we present a preliminary operations budget, which really reflects the service that the cities purchase from Valley Metro, so that that can help the cities with their own budgeting process. That's one of the reasons we start so early. We continue to refine that and then present updated key assumptions through our financial working group and through our audit and finance subcommittee. And then this month, we are presenting the preliminary budget. This is for information and discussion only. We'll take your comments and the comments from the management committee and from your staff and provide updates. And we'll be back hopefully in May for approval. If there's not comfort in May, then that we still have until June. So we try to give ourselves a little bit of a buffer there. So last fall, or last summer, I guess, really, there was still a lot of uncertainty about the revenues and how the pandemic was going to impact revenues. So we developed internally 3 different scenarios for alternative forecasts for our Prop 400 funds. That's in addition to ADOT's official forecast that we typically use. So ADOT developed their forecast late September of last year. So we've really had 4 forecasts we've been looking at. Our scenario 1, slightly more conservative than ADOT's official forecast. Our scenario 2, we really modeled after what happened post 9/11 with revenues where they flattened out and then continued to grow. And the scenario 3 was a little more catastrophic, if you will, much like the Great Recession, where we actually had years of declining revenues before we actually saw some growth. So what we decided with the financial working group and with the audit and finance subcommittee was to be a little more conservative back in August, September, and to use that scenario 1 as our base revenue forecast to develop the budget. So you can see for fiscal 22, it's about a $4.5 million difference from the ADOT forecast. For scenario 1, we're about a $5 million difference for the current fiscal year. And so what we agreed to do, what we said we'd do, is really track our revenues this year against that fiscal 21 number, present a budget in March for discussion, but then make a decision about which scenario really matches the revenue trends properly, and so how we're going to move forward with the final proposed budget and which forecast we would use. So if you could go to the next slide. Tracking our revenues, we now have our February revenues that are not on this chart, but you can see that month to month, our fiscal 21 actuals have been consistently higher than fiscal 20 actuals, and that through January, about 8.2 million above budget, and including February, we're about 8.8 million above budget. So that trend has really been positive for our Prop 400 revenues. And so given that trend, given the new American Rescue Plan that will provide additional stimulus, the budget we present today, as I mentioned, is based on that scenario 1, a little more conservative. But for our final budget, we have made the decision to pivot that to the slightly higher ADOT official forecast. And so we'll talk a little bit about, I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through the slide. But that is the decision that we've made based on trends and the approval of the ARP. As you can see, if the trend continues through the rest of this year, we would surpass all of the 4 forecasts that we have by quite a bit. We're on track to be about 14 or 15 million above budget for the end of the fiscal year. So as I said, just looking at those different forecasts, the budget you're going to see today is based on scenario 1, which is a little more conservative, but we are going to pivot to the higher official forecast for the final budget that we bring forward in May. Going to the next slide. We do have contingency plans in place. The scenario 1 plan is kind of what's reflected in our base budget today, but that will become a contingency as we move to the official ADOT forecast. We will have plans set aside that are ready to go should the revenue trend not continue for each of these scenarios. So we'll be able to quickly move to address any revenue shortfalls. But as I mentioned, given the trend today, we don't plan to have any of this in the base budget we bring for adoption.
And Paul, if I could, remember also, this is where the ARP kicks into and these scenarios. We also have not only our local Prop 400 revenues, but the federal Recovery Act funds that are meant to cover this very situation.
Thank you. As Scott mentioned earlier, a lot of the revenue, a lot of the service that we provide is funded locally. Probably 40 to 50% of the service Valley Metro operates is funded by the cities. So we are tracking how some of the cities across the valley, how their revenues look. And as you can see, some of the cities, Glendale, Phoenix, Mesa, have seen positive growth. Tempe's a little bit flat. So not the decrease they had anticipated, but certainly not seeing the type of growth that other cities in the region is seeing. So some differences across the valley, but in general, more positive than had been budgeted. So some of the key assumptions that we've included in this budget, again, a little bit more conservative approach for this base budget based on scenario 1. We got some feedback that there's definitely concern about ridership and how that may recover through the pandemic and what fare revenue we may have. So we've pulled back a little bit on our ridership and fare revenue assumptions. So for fiscal 22, we've only assumed fare revenues back to about a third of pre-COVID levels. We do have the CRISA funds identified in this budget, in this preliminary budget. We have not yet, obviously, programmed any of the ARP, the ARP funds, since that's relatively new. But we anticipate about $20 million of the CRISA funds available to RPTA in this budget. We do also anticipate returning to front door boardings at some point. We expect all of the permanent operator barriers to be installed. It says June, it may be in July. I think our supplier is having some issues with the supply of the barriers. But by summertime, we should be able to return to our front door boarding. Just very quickly on base service levels, as I mentioned, quite a lot of service is locally or city funded, a lot of circulator service, a little bit of express and local. The regionally funded PTF service, express, and a fair amount of local service, so 14.3 million revenue miles anticipated. Just very quickly through kind of a summary of our baseline assumptions. You can see passenger boardings at the top there. We do anticipate getting some boardings back, but not nearly back to the pre-COVID levels. As you can see, about 11 million in fiscal 20. We're looking at about 5.5 for our bus operations next year, with fare revenues at about 2.8 million, well below our pre-COVID levels. In terms of paratransit operations, slight decrease in our budgeted number of trips, still higher than fiscal 20. We do anticipate seeing some growth in our paratransit operation. I'll note that in fiscal 21, we are considerably under budget, under the number of trips. So really it's growth from what we're seeing today, not from the budget, with about $49 a trip with about a $4 average fare. On our ride choice services, kind of a similar story. We are under budget this year on the number of trips, but do anticipate getting some of that back to about 191,000 next year, about a $3.28 average fare with an $18.45 cost per trip. Just a quick look at some of our baseline assumption on operations, an overall look at our operating and capital. You can see nearly half of our budget is dedicated to services. That's our bus service, paratransit, van pool service. Capital activities is the next largest category with some of our fiscal administration and regional services. On the sources side, the largest source obviously is our Prop 400 or public transportation funds. You'll see that in two different slices of the pie. One is 34%, which comes to the bus program, and then an additional 17%, which is available for passing through to Valley Metro Rail for light rail construction and planning activities. Federal funds is also a significant portion. Transit service reimbursements, which is really funding from the cities for service, about 11% of the overall budget. Looking at some of the details, uses of funds at a higher level. Fixed route operations or bus service, about a 3% increase from fiscal 21. Demand service, 33% increase. This is a little bit misleading because some of those costs are budgeted net, particularly net of CARES Act funds. So the fiscal 21 number is really, it's artificially low because of the CARES Act. So the increase in demand service is really because of the lower amount of federal support. Vanpool basically flat, but our planning, administration, and finance and regional services, some of those internal costs that we have, wanting to be a little bit more conservative. Overall, it's about a $1 million decrease in those areas, just to be a little bit more conservative. So overall, about $170 million operating budget. On the sources, I'll point out again, fair revenue quite low, about 4.7 million overall, about half of what we would normally see pre-COVID. And then the other thing I'd point out, with the Federal CARES Act, we did program using all of that in fiscal 21. We have CRISA in at about 18 million. So that difference there then has to be made up by local funds, primarily you'll see the increase in public transportation funds and also the transit service agreements. On the capital side, the RPTA's capital program is largely made up of our fleet replacement program. So you can see that's about $38 million next year, with debt service being the next largest. So $74 million in capital, which is a little bit of a decrease from fiscal 21. The sources for those, primarily federal and our Prop 400 funds, both with some current revenues and then also the use of some fund balance, which is programmed out through our transit life cycle program. The other category I'll mention is what we call pass-through funds. These are funds that we manage really on behalf of the region or on behalf of others. Arizona lottery funds, we receive money from the lottery and disperse those out to the cities and towns in the county to support public transportation. The Valley Metro Rail, that's salaries, fringe, and overhead that RPTA provides on behalf of Valley Metro Rail, and then the rail program disbursements, again, for planning and funding of capital extensions. The sources for those, primarily public transportation funds. Again, I mentioned the lottery funds, the VMR reimbursements. Those are reimbursements directly from rail for those salary, fringe, and overhead costs that we provide. So looking at our staffing, we did have a couple of mid-year additions that we changes. Those are IT staff that we had initially hired consultants and converted those to full-time equivalents. We converted those to staff positions, and that is actually a savings over what we were paying as contractors. And then we have 4 positions, or portions of 4 positions. Another IT position that is a contractor conversion to staff, which will, again, save some money. A couple of operations and maintenance staff to support oversight of our services, and then 1 additional safety and security staff member to support some of the additional federal requirements that we have for safety and security. Lastly, just a recap of where we are. This is for information. Be happy to answer any questions, take any feedback you have. We'll go back and take a look, make some adjustments. We've already presented our 5-year plan to the financial working group. We'll present that preliminary plan through the Audit and Finance Subcommittee next month, and then come back in May, potentially June if we need it for approval. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Paul. Does anyone have any comments or questions?
Yes, Mr. Chair. If the passengers are loading from the rear of the bus, how they collected the fare?
Currently, but there is still a requirement for passengers to have fares. We are collecting some fares as they buy passes, but clearly, since they're not boarding through the front door, we're not capturing any cash fares, and we are not asking them to swipe their card. So that's one of the key reasons that our fare revenue is down considerably this year, but we do expect to get some back as we move back to the front door boarding.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Winters. Anybody else?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, it's Lauren.
Yes,
I just want to say, and we talked about this in AFS, and after a lot of discussion in AFS about the fare revenue projections, I'm pleased to see, the lower forecast, because I just, and I know I wasn't alone in thinking that the the projections were a little bit unrealistic and that, there's going to be a lot more work from home. And so I think I'm glad to see that we're using conservative numbers there. So, rather under project than over project and then fall short. So thank you guys for making those adjustments.
Thank you, Lauren. Anyone else?
Hey, Chair Edwards, this is Councilmember Arredondo Savage.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, cool. Thank you very much. Just a couple things. I want to back up and first thank you, Paul, for mentioning the AFS. For some reason, we got left off the agenda. I'm usually able to give an AFS update, and I can see Pat's face like, oh dang. So my bad too. I should have caught it. I know there's a lot of stuff on this agenda and things that we've been talking about within AFS. So Paul, I appreciate you pointing out some of those things. And I just want to remind the board that, I'm really thankful for the AFS committee because they do a lot of really good work and we do a lot of deep dives and ask a lot of really hard questions. And Lauren mentioned that a little bit. So I just want to reiterate one of the things that we did after, like Paul mentioned, was to agree with utilizing the ADOT financial forecast. So Paul, thank you for bringing that to our attention. But but Lauren mentioned also too, was there's still really a lot of concerns and things that we've talked about in AFS in regards to the increased percentages of operations and how the increased percentage of operations is a little bit is starting to outpace, individual local tax revenues. So something that we wanted to definitely keep our eye on. And I think Roland, you brought it up too in regarding fare recovery, how important it is when we return to get back into better ridership and do front door boarding, that we make sure that we have enforcement consistencies throughout the region. So that's something that AFS has been talking about and knows really important, that we need to make sure that we are maximizing all of our revenues. And we have such a really large investment with our new fare collections plan that we want to make sure that we were doing everything that we can to ensure that we are maximizing and being as efficient as we possibly can too. And another thing I'd like to ask Chair Edwards too is I just want to ensure and ask the board, I'm not really sure how we can do this, and maybe it's through a survey process, is that you are getting the right information from the AFS and that we are doing everything that the board expects us to do by taking the deep dive, asking the hard questions, and that we are able to relay that information to the board in a useful, helpful way. And I don't know what that looks like, but if the board is okay with that, we would just like to make sure that the communication and the information that we are digging deep on is being utilized to the best of our ability, I think, as a board and as a region, if that would be okay.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Anyone else? Okay, well, this was an item for presentation only, so obviously more to come. If there are any questions or concerns with this later on, please make sure you reach out to Scott and his staff with your concerns. Okay, item number 5 would be future item request. Is there any member that has anything that they'd like to put on a future agenda?
Mr. Chair, it's Lauren. I'd just like to echo Robin's comments, though. As a member of AFS, it's important to us that we are meeting the expectations of the board. So it's not necessarily an agenda, but it's a comment that I'd really like for the feedback. I know we all would, for the board to make sure that we are meeting their expectations with the work that we're doing on AFS. So I'd just like to echo on second Robin's request.
Okay, you know what, I'm gonna reach out to 2 of you later this afternoon and see if come up with some way to get a poll from the other members. Okay.
Mr. Chair, this is Bill.
Yes, Bill.
I wasn't fast enough on my unmute button at the end of the first meeting. I think coming up in the future as we get ready to, because it's already going to be April, May. Aren't we supposed to be hearing from a consultant or something about the appraisals that are due mid-year this year? I'd like to know where we stand on that, if we can get that in some sort of an update. or if that belongs on the next agenda, I don't know, but I think we're behind, we should be somewhere on this.
Mr. Smith, can we get that on the next agenda item for an update?
Mr. Chairman, Vice Mayor Stipp, this is Alexis. I just wanted to give you an update that we have been working with the consultant who is pulling together a number of different items, but I anticipate information, including a survey, is going to be hitting your inboxes. If not Friday evening, it will be to you by Monday morning. So we are at that process, and we can share more information if you like in the future. Some of that information is maybe possibly executive session information, but I know for certain you will be getting some follow-up from the consultant, I would say within the next 4 or 5 days.
Okay.
Okay. If we've established what the process is, I think we ought to know about it. Because
Yes,
this is brand new territory for all of us. So if we've got a schedule of this is going to happen and then this is going to happen, and then that would be very, very helpful, because right now we're all in the dark.
Mr. Chairman, Vice Mayor Stipp, that is the information you're about to receive.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Bill. Okay, does anybody else have any other future agenda items possible? Okay. Item number 6 would be our next meeting. Our next meeting is scheduled for Thursday, April 22nd at 11 o'clock in the morning. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. If the Valley Metro Rail board members could stay on the line, then we can conduct that meeting also. Thank you. Chair Heredia, we can start whenever you, we can start whenever you're ready.
Maybe. Yeah, okay.
Okay.
All right, it seems like most of the folks have signed off. Welcome to Valley Metro Rail meeting. Item number 1 for today's public meeting. We'll take public comments being taken in written format and will be entered in the official minutes of the meeting. Item number 2, the minutes from the January 21st, 2021 board meeting are as presented for approval. Request a motion and a second to approve the board meeting minutes of January 21st.
So moved.
Sure. Thank you,
I'm
Mary.
sorry. Councilwoman Arredondo looks like she has her hand up.
Perfect.
Sorry,
Anyone opposed?
Thank you, Mayor, I appreciate that. I'm just trying to get organized. Second?
You have a comment? Yeah, second? Okay, perfect. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Item number 3, the consent agenda is presented for action. Anyone have any questions or comments? Anything needing to be pulled for discussion?
Move approval.
Perfect. Second, can I get a second? All right, thank you. Anyone opposed? No, motion carries. Thank you. Item number 4, I'll send it to Scott. You want to present this or have somebody, Paul, present this item, Scott?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, thank you. I'll turn it over to Paul.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Again, as with RPTA, just a brief overview. Some of the slides are duplicative, so I'll kind of run through those quickly try to save a little bit of time. So the budget process, again, this is for information today. We've gone through an extensive process to get here. If you could just go to the next slide. Some of the key assumptions, similar to the RPTA, we heard some concerns about the ridership and the fare revenues. We've pulled back a little. Fare revenues we've assumed for VMR to be about a quarter of pre-COVID levels. And then, of course, we've included the CRISA funds, but obviously have not yet included the ARP funds. And so we're looking at approximately 20 million for VMR. We still haven't fixed that to say it for VMR, but it's not RPTA. Trust me, it's 20 million for VMR.
And Paul, if you could, just to remind, once again, fair revenues are the things that are a great loss, but the ARP funds are how much for Valley Metro? Just so they know what it is for rail. It's about 50 million.
We're estimating about 50 million, but those final amounts are determined by MAG, not by us. So that's
Just
our
to
estimate.
keep it in context, you've got the CRISA funds that are in this budget, but just around $50 million that will be available through ARP. And it's the same thing on RPTA, about just shy of $50 million that will be available to cover those fair revenue losses.
So looking at some of our base assumptions, passenger boardings, again, we do anticipate getting some recovery in boardings, but certainly about half of what we saw in fiscal 20. So a little bit conservative there. And fare revenues about 2.5 million. We are running well under budget in fiscal 21, probably about half that budget. So a little bit of additional recovery from actuals, but less than the fiscal 21 budget. We do anticipate starting the streetcar next year. It was in the fiscal 21 budget as May. Obviously, that's not going to happen. For budget purposes, we've assumed an October 1 start, so 9 months of service, looking at about 300,000 boardings and just under a $5 million operating cost. That does assume a 10-minute headway. We're still in discussions with Tempe about what service level to provide, but this is kind of the not to exceed amount, if you will. It includes those 10-minute headways. Looking at kind of the overall uses of funds, clearly the capital activities is the largest component with the significant extensions that are under construction right now. Passenger service about 12%, planning and administration about the other 3%. On the sources side, unlike RPTA, member city contributions, city funds fund 100% of light rail and streetcar operating costs. Those are not eligible for Prop 400 funds. So as you can see, well over 50% of funding for the budget, it comes from those member city funds. Federal funds providing another significant amount of the contribution. PTF will support planning and also some of the construction activities. Looking at some of the uses, our light rail operations and maintenance, about a $3 million change, which is 6%. I will note that a large part of that, about 1.1 million, almost a third of the increase, is directly a result of the increased insurance premiums. Light rail security, about 9.6 million. It's a little bit of an increase from 21, but we had some additional contingency built in since we're reprocuring that contract. That will be coming to the board, I believe, next month. And we've actually negotiated a much better rate than what you see in here. So that number will come down for our final budget. So we're happy to see that. Streetcar operations, about 4.3 million with 700,000 for security, about a $12 million planning budget, and about 2.1 million for our agency operating. Again, on the sources side, you can see that difference between the CARES and the CRISA. We'll be adding some of those ARP funds as we move forward. But that difference, that reduction in the federal funds supporting operations really explains that significant increase in those member city contributions. Advertising, we're still unsure. We've estimated conservatively, not back to pre-COVID levels, as we're really not sure how the advertising market will rebound for us. So about $81 million overall. On the capital side, again, this is largely extensive construction and expansion, South Central and Northwest Phase 2, wrapping up the Tempe streetcar and the OMC expansion. Those should be completed this calendar year. Gilbert Road extension is still in the budget. That's primarily for funding the 3 Siemens vehicles that we're in the midst of receiving and putting into service. About a $483 million capital budget. On the sources side, significant amount of federal. I'll note the fiscal 21 federal amount is a little bit of an anomaly because we signed that full funding grant agreement with South Central. which allows us to get reimbursed for previous fiscal year expenses going back to when the project started in July of 2017. So the 171 million we'd see as more of a normal amount moving forward. A significant amount of member city contributions and some public transportation funds supporting the program. For the staff changes, we did not have any mid-year additions, no changes there. We do see two new positions in fiscal 22. One's a deputy director level to support the operations and the continued expansion of the system, and one for safety and security, again, to address some of the additional requirements from FTA as they expand some of the safety requirements and the state safety oversight that we're subject to. So it was very, very high level. Actually, you can go to the next slide. Our budgets are online if you would like to look at a lot of the detail. We'd be happy to take any questions, comments today. We'd like comments back from you and your staff by mid-April so we can make adjustments as we come back through the May process, hopefully for adoption. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Perfect. Thank you, Paul. Any questions or comments? All right. Robin, you have a question?
No, not a question, just really a comment. So thanks, I do appreciate that, Chair. Actually, Paul, I just wanted to say thank you to that. I think one of the things I think that worries us from the city of Tempe perspective in bringing on the streetcar, as exciting and everything that it is the operating costs. So I definitely do appreciate the fact that you had mentioned working with the city of Tempe and really trying to understand what our operating scenarios are going to be. So we don't have such a wow factor when it comes to the operating cost, and that's going to be really important to us moving forward. So I just wanted to tell Paul, thank you for continuing to just acknowledge that this is an estimate and we really haven't gotten anything set in stone yet. Thank you, Chair.
Perfect. All right. Again, this item was being presented for information. I'm not sure if there's any other comments. Hearing none, we'll move forward. Item 5, future agenda items, requests or report on current events. Anyone have any agenda items to request?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Mayor.
And I guess also on the last item, I will keep my comments on the budget until after we get a report we're going to have at the next AFS subcommittee. So looking forward to that. I would love it if this board could see an update on our business partners, our small business spend, and our diverse business partners, and just get a sense of who we are contracting with and how much of our community we are touching with it.
Mayor, are you specifically talking about the business assistance program?
No, just understanding our consultants. I've been following some of the other things other transit agencies are doing to make sure they support small businesses and that they're spending locally. And so this would be.
Yes, all right. We can have our chief procurement officer look at some of the contracts we have and how it affects small business and disadvantaged business. Absolutely.
Wonderful. It's Women's History Month, so always good to highlight some of our women-owned business partners.
Mayor Gallego, I certainly support and agree with that. So if that helps at all, I think that's really good information to have.
Yeah, we'll have Patty give you a report on what we're doing on that front. So we'll do that.
Thank you, Mayor. I also have an agenda item. I would like to see if Valley Metro Rail can put it as an agenda item, a change in a point of interest sign that we have at our Sycamore Main Street location in Mesa. We have it as a Tri-City Mall location, but if anyone knows that Tri-City is no longer there, or the mall portion piece, we recently, before COVID, had gone into a rebranding of the location. Just next to it, our Dobson in Main Street location into an Asian district branding process, and of course COVID stopped that from moving forward. But we're currently again bringing that up as far as branding that area, as we have over 80 plus Asian businesses that have come along in the last 10 years in about a mile location from Main Street along Dobson to Southern. And so we'd like to request a change of the point of interest sign to the Asian district for that location. So.
Okay, Mr. Chair, we'll make sure that we work with your staff to complete all the paperwork, so it'll be an action item in next month's agenda.
Perfect. Thank you. Anyone else? All right, next item, next meeting is Thursday, April 22nd. See you there. Thank you, everybody.
Have a good afternoon.